Welcome to Bible study. Today we're looking at the Gospel according to St. Matthew in chapter 14, if you want to grab your Bibles and look at that. Last Sunday, in our Sunday morning discussion, we had a fascinating conversation about this, and I want to just recapitulate just a little bit about that. This was the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. And we noticed a few things, particularly when we thought about it in terms of the mission statement or the mission of St. Michael's Lutheran Church. It was very interesting to us that the disciples perceived the need of the people around them. We thought that was actually something that really resonated with our mission, that we had talked about a mission statement. We've tentatively put one forward for agreement. We've asked you to vote on it. It talks about serving our neighbors. But when you serve somebody, if you really want to serve them, you have to first know what they need. I think a lot of times when we have entered into the realm of serving people, we have looked at what we have and tried to concoct or make some sort of service to talk about what we have and more or less tell people what they need. There is a point where that works. If you're familiar with the story of the Origin of Crisco, you know that it's quite possible to create a need. Originally, the people who made cotton clothing and milled or ginned cotton were left with these enormous piles of cotton seeds, and they didn't know what to do with it. And so they made cottonseed oil. Well, what do you do with cottonseed oil? They discovered that if they emulsified it and got it ready, they could make this concoction that would work quite well for cooking. It was kind of a lard substitute. And they, through marketing, generated this entire need for Crisco until they had the cotton gin came along and started producing all of these excess cotton seeds. They didn't need Crisco. There was no need for it. And they, more or less through marketing, told people, you need this, and people agreed, and they started buying it. Now, that's pretty unusual. We need to look at what people need. That's one of our first things. And we thought that was really interesting, that the disciples noticed the needs. And that then Jesus said to them, answer the need. And the disciples, in a bit of common sense, which is somewhat unusual for them, and a bit of common sense came to him and said, but we don't have enough. And Jesus' response to them is terrifying. He says, well, bring me what you have. He doesn't say, bring me your leftovers. Eat your lunch first, and then let's see what you got left, and we'll make it go. He said, bring me what you have. And they did. He blessed it, he broke the bread, he handed it back to them, and in an amazing moment, I think of tremendous faith, those disciples started handing out 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish to thousands of hungry people. They didn't have enough, but Jesus made it enough. I think there's lots of stories of people who have done things like that. If you want an interesting one, read the story of Dorothy. She was a rather dissolute young woman who started coming to faith in the early years of the 20th century, found herself living in New York City at the height of the Great Depression, and saw these lines of hopeless, miserable people looking for jobs, they said the unemployment rate in New York at the time topped 25%. And she just said, these guys need something to eat. And so she started making coffee and sandwiches and serving out of her back door. And that got blessed in a way. And Dorothy Day's Catholic worker movement continues to this day and continues to serve the needs of needy people that way. Jesus has a way of blessing those who do what he commands, those who pursue his mission. And they don't necessarily ask, do I have enough? They start by asking, what do people need? And what is Jesus telling me to do? And then they go and do it. That's a really frightening place to be. People who write budgets and treasurers and people who manage institutions like a congregation, they like to know that they're going to be able to meet budget. They like to know they have the resources before they do something. And it is really, really terrifying institutionally to go out and do that, which makes this next story really, really interesting. Matthew chapter 14, and we are in chapter 14, verse 22. Immediately, so right after the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus makes the disciples get into the boat, and they go before him to the other side. Notice he does not get in the boat. After he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. If you remember, that was kind of what Jesus was after anyway. He had withdrawn from his public ministry to the other side of the Sea of Galilee because he had heard that his cousin John the Baptist had been killed. But the boat, where the disciples are, was a long way from the land. Beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. It was evening now. And in the fourth watch of the night, so this is middle of the night, dark, dark. Remember, there is no artificial lighting. It is just dark. The disciples saw him walking on the sea, and they were terrified. And they said, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you in the water." And he said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." Well, sometimes you go out on a limb, you walk out in faith, you start feeding the hungry people when you don't have the resources, and it can really feel like you're going underwater. And it can really feel like you are sinking. And honestly, there are some ministries that sink. Not everything works. But again, we have this image of Jesus being able to make it work. And even when we lose faith, even when we doubt, when we pay attention to all the wrong things, Jesus will still be right there. I think a lot of times this little story, we kind of allegorize it, and we talk about how, the storm is like all the troubles of life, and you've got to. I would encourage you to just not do that. I think the focus here is really on Jesus. That Jesus is the one who rescues us. He saves us. Jesus is, Jesus the good lifeguard today. He is the one who, when it really feels like something is going over our heads, he's the guy who's going to pull that off. He's the guy who's going to reach out his hand and take us and lift us. What exactly that's going to look like, how exactly he's going to do that, and be aware, it may be that he will reach down into your grave and lift you out, but he will do it. God bless you.